Hi, I'm Steve Arterburn, and this is our 12th session in studying the 7-Minute Marriage Solution. Really glad that you're hanging in there, you're doing the work. This is our in part two, our fifth session on what to start doing. And tonight, this session is one that everybody can do, everybody can benefit from, because we're all imperfect people. You may have been expecting a little more perfect human being when you got married. You may be shocked and surprised at the sins that the person you're with commits. Well, the Bible says we're all sinners. I've sinned a couple of times just doing these videos. Not really. Well, maybe I have. But the point is that we're all going to do imperfect things, uncaring things. We're all going to blow it. We're all going to mess up. And that leads us to this fifth thing that we can start doing, and that is to start expressing grace and forgiveness to the person that we love. God has given us so much grace and mercy that I think that we stop giving it to somebody else when we fail to see our own sin nature and our own depravity, when we aren't grateful or fully aware of the sacrifice that Christ made for our own sins. But I believe that when we live in that grace and that forgiveness, we want to give it to somebody else. Now, I believe one of the reasons that you may not be giving grace and forgiveness to your spouse is that you are drenched in and saturated with shame. In the recovery world, they have this expression where they say, if you spot it, you got it. Well, a lot of times we're so shameful over our own things that we have that we're very quick to point it out in another person. I think that shame is such a dilemma in our world. I think one of the reasons that you cut down and you criticize other people rather than give them grace and forgiveness is because you feel so shameful about your situation. Any opportunity to make someone else look worse or where it feels like they're coming down to your level, you take it and you do it. I've seen such hurtful things in the Christian community. I wrote a book on toxic faith about the hurtful things that people do to each other as Christians. And you know, when you boil it down, Christianity is about serving and sacrificing, loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. And you can't love somebody if you don't extend grace and forgiveness to them. You've been holding someone hostage by the things that they've done. You've never let them forget it. You bring it up too much, or you bring it up at all. And God is not blessing your relationship because God's forgiven you and given you grace, but you haven't expressed that same kind of grace and forgiveness toward the other person. You know, it really is important that we see the bigger picture, that we don't sweat the small stuff, that we don't allow the little things that don't matter so much to burden us and to irritate us. You know, sometimes we are so arrogant ourselves that we feel like it's our God-given duty to correct every little problem that we see in the other person. Well, you know, someone said, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Do you want to be right or do you want to have a sexual relationship with this person? Well, another way to say it is, do you want to be correct or do you want to be connected to that person? Because so often you think they need correction when what they really need is your connection. And of course, this applies to our children too. You've seen rebellious teenagers. There aren't any more consequences that you can put on them. And then one day you decide, hey, they're trying to make a point. I need to connect with their heart. And then you offer some grace and forgiveness. You share openly about yourself and you see some breakthroughs happen. Well, if that can happen with a rebellious teenager, that can happen with a spouse. Maybe you need to begin in expressing grace and forgiveness by admitting and confessing and opening up about your own weaknesses, your own mistakes, your own shame. And together, you go forth with your partner, trying to provide the the grace that God has given you, the forgiveness that God has given you, giving it to each other. Let the other person off the hook. Now, of course, if there's work that needs to be done, if they're continuing to sin and it's abusive and it's hurtful and addictive, then you need to take care of that. But many times we're holding a grudge against somebody over something that happened long ago, and it simply doesn't matter. Give grace and give forgiveness, and you will be the one that will be blessed.